This is the Buck Sexton Show.
To my fellow Team Buck Millennials, do you want to live in the burbs? You want to move out to the suburbs? The new evidence on this, or I should say the new statistics on this, based on surveys, is that, in fact, most of my fellow millennials, we do want to live in the burbs. And this is a surprise to developers and people who look at this and try to essentially gauge where the demand will be. 66% of millennials, according to the Wall Street Journal, want to live in the burbs. And this is, and when they look at the reasons why, even though our generation particularly seems to really like having access to restaurants and entertainment and all that kind of stuff, because, you know, food is now better than it's ever been. There's more stuff that you can go see. There's more in the media world than there ever has been. But I think it's also just that people recognize that they really get sick after a while, and I speak from some experience on this. We get sick of living in glorified closets in urban environments, particularly in New York City. I mean, I can actually sit on my couch, reach over, pull my refrigerator door open, and reach over and pull something off my desk. That is how close everything is. I have sort of a closet area. It's not really a closet per se. It's a section of my room, which is actually my apartment, where I just stack stuff and sort of hang it all together. And I make it work. It looks sort of like a deconstructionist art project of some kind, but I make it work. What I think we're seeing, though, is that there has been this idea that, well, everyone's moving to the cities because of work and we're younger. We're waiting longer to have kids, too, by the way. The average age, I thought this was fascinating, the average age for a mother to have her first child in 1980 was 22. As of 2010, it was over 25. So there's been a little bit of a bump up there as well. People are waiting a little longer. Now the idea seems to be you go into this city, you do your stuff, but then when things settle down a little bit, your career is a little more in one direction. No reference to the band there. You move out into the suburbs, and then you can get the golden retriever, and you have the kids and the better schools and all that sort of stuff. Apparently, that's still the model, I guess, is what we're seeing. And I think for those of us who are veterans of, let's just say, give it your best shot urban living, I mean, man, I've had some situations that you wouldn't believe the stuff you dealt with in New York. I lived in D.C. too, but New York is particularly. I mean, there was one place I lived in a nice neighborhood. It was a building full of younger people, all around my age. We're all in our sort of late 20s. And that place, on Sunday morning, it would just smell like a dorm room. And there were basically red Solo cups turned over in the hallways. And there were trash bags everywhere. And it just was a total mess. And like all my other millennial peers, we were basically paying 70% of our paychecks to live in this glorified dorm in this urban environment, or it was sort of like living on ship. I mean, I had more spacious accommodations in war zones where I had, you know, roommates and bunkmates and such than I did paying top dollar for me and for other millennials who are trying to make it living in urban environments. So I just got to say, it's always, and the other thing you have to get used to here, and many of you are going to say, you guys are so ridiculous with your city living. But one thing you also have to take into account is you're getting used to noise. The noises, your tolerance for noise living in a city is something that when I go out and I see my parents in the country, they have a house in upstate New York. I go see them, and it's just the silence. At night, there's quiet. You hear an owl hoot sometimes. But for me, that's kind of unnerving because I'm like, where's the backing up garbage truck? And where's the beep, beep? And where's the guy yelling, hey, you never loved me. And I'm, it's just craziness, man. I sleep right through that like a baby. I don't even notice anymore. Just hear all kinds of stuff. You hear a loud crash. You're like, it's just a bottle. Maybe somebody threw it out a window somewhere. But hey, it's just, you get used to it. But so, to my fellow millennials, apparently we still want the American dream of living in the burbs, white picket fence. I'm gonna say yellow lab. I'm gonna put it out there. As much as I'm a city guy and I love my Boston Terriers and my French Bulldogs, if you got the room, you go yellow lab. Maybe you go golden retriever. Maybe you get a little saucy. I don't know. And maybe you go to Home Depot. I don't know if you have enough time, but maybe you do. So one thing to think about is that apparently we all want a little room to live, my friends. We're not looking to live like we're on a submarine for the rest of our lives. We have Diane in Illinois. Diane, good to hear from you.
How are you?
Good.
I am dying to know your source for millennials wanting to live in the suburbs.
It's the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. I am fighting two mayors. We have twin cities here. Both of them think the future is downtown, that strip malls are dead. People want to live in these little bitty things. In fact, one of them is in the process of building micro apartments. And they're going to spend $60 million.
We just so you know, Diane, we have pioneered the micro apartments here in New York City. We will take a one-bedroom and cut it up 4 ways with fake walls and make that a 4-bedroom out of about 500 square feet. Bam! Pioneers. Go ahead.
These two towns are 75,000 and 55,000. You can drive from one end of one of them to the other end of the other one in 20 minutes. But they're constantly talking about the long commute times. You know, we got to cut down on the commutes. We need people living downtown so they don't have to commute as far. It's like, is 20 minutes a long commute to you?
No, 20 minutes is not a long commute. But you know, when I was working at Langley, I think that was about what my commute was, and that was rather pleasant. I have to say, it was kind of nice. Although the people that were heading into D.C., I was heading out of D.C. They were in a long line every day. But you know, Diane, I just think that the preference in housing, and remember, millennials, they think now are going to be a bigger age bracket bulge than even the baby boom was. So the whole notion of the boomers and, there's so many boomers and how are we going to deal with the entitlements and stuff, there's even more millennials. The millennial generation is even larger. They're estimating 70 to 80 million, but they, because of some of the trends from the late 80s and throughout the 90s, the idea has been that, everyone's going to live in the cities. But now what they're seeing is that, actually, as people, there's sort of a rhythm to this. And as people get a little older, as much as I can joke around about how it's fun to shower in my bed while reaching over to my computer on my desk from my bed and being able to make myself a sandwich from my kitchen from my bed, if I ever want to have more than, a Shih Tzu or a Chihuahua as my companion, I'm probably going to need to move to a place that has a little more room. Yeah,
and just wait till you throw a couple rugrats in there,
They're definitely going to need more room because there is... Right now, Casa de Buck does not have if I built a crib, I would have to sleep in it. There's nowhere for it to go. So this is, but I just think it's interesting also because it's going to have an impact on, it's going to have an impact on a lot of the decisions people make about their lives going forward. And developers are now saying, wait a second, we need to be prepared for the flight from cities, not to cities. That's going to happen as people that are, in their 20s and 30s are saying, I just don't want to hack it in this urban. And I'm a city dweller. I've been my whole life, and even I say sometimes, I don't know, grass. There are things that sound nice about that. Diane, thank you for calling in from Illinois. It's good to hear from you. Let's have Mimi in California. Mimi's about to drop some Agenda 21 knowledge. What's going on here?
Hey, Buck. I wanted to talk about the fact that, Glenn just came out with his next level of Agenda 21 book, and I wanted to point out to people that the groundwork for that is being laid right now, and it was what your previous caller just talked about forcing people into the cities. And it came into this country, it's called Sustainable Community Strategies. And what she said is happening in these small towns is happening all across the country. DOT, HUD, and EPA are funding this concept of sustainable community strategies, which is high-density housing near mass transit. If you look in any city plans, they're all being forced to do this because they're getting highway funds and road funds from the feds if they comply with these plans. And so this is the groundwork that we've talked about before with Agenda 21, where the whole idea is to force people into the cities and get them off the land and not go into the suburbs because we don't want to have sprawl. That's bad. And that study that you just quoted in the Wall Street Journal, that's a great study, and there are a lot of other studies that have come up and said the same thing. But the problem is that the powers that be in the government and all these consulting firms and architects, they're coming out with studies that say we must have people live in the cities. And so we're fighting this out here in the Bay Area. It's called Plan Bay Area. It's a regional plan. It's forcing all of this density all over the region, and this is happening everywhere.
Well, it ties in, Mimi, to concepts that are very prominent on the progressive left as well, like sustainability And also, you can really take this back to the sort of Malthusian overpopulation arguments, because it's really hard to have. I mean, I come from a family of 4 in New York City, and people meet me and they hear about that. They're like, "You guys must be aliens." I mean, that's crazy. No one has 4 kids in New York City. And it's true. We were one of. I think there was one other family I sort of grew up with and knew of that had more kids than us. They had 5. But generally speaking, 4 is like, for a place like New York City, that's completely. You rarely hear about that sort of thing. And you know, I have to say, Mimi, that when you also look at just the sort of notions of controlling utilities and controlling access roads and transit and all of that, if everyone is concentrated in one area, it's just for government planners, for progressives, for statists, it's just easier to determine everything about what you do, right? If you got people living all over the place, it's harder to say, well, this is what your water usage is going to be, because some people are going to have their own wells, or this is what your electricity is going to be, because some people will have their own generators or their own, whatever, they're off the grid. If you get everybody to live in housing that falls under government mandates in terms of just the resources, it's easier to control what they're doing.
Yeah, and let me just throw out a statistic, because the progressives are saying we're running out of land. Less than 6% of the land in the United States is populated. That's why there's all this flyover country, right? There are the population is in the cities, but it's a very small percentage of the land that's used. And one of the excuses has been, we're running out of land. We're sprawling. We're going to kill the earth because people are overpopulating it. And, as Mark Levin said at one point, we're not running out of land, we're running out of liberty. And that's really where it's at right now. So I would encourage everybody, Google sustainable community strategies. It is the policy of HUD, and they're forcing this into all the towns and cities in the United States.
All right, Mimi, thank you for calling in. HUD, by the way, is part of that lawsuit that I spoke to you about, where you have, it's essentially the fair housing as a concept, right? And what is fair is, of course, the most abused word in the progressive lexicon. What is fair? Fair is whatever they say is fair. But you have HUD and various federal regulations implemented by HUD and other agencies, including the IRS, giving tax credits for building homes in predominantly minority neighborhoods. And one of the reasons they do that is because the land is cheaper, so the tax credits go further, so they incentivize people to build, and so they're finding the cheaper places they can build, and then they turn around and say, but no, that's discriminatory because you're building this subsidized housing in minority predominant areas. We want you to build it in white predominant areas. The problem with that is that the land is generally more expensive in those areas. And so they're saying, look, we're not trying to be racist. We're not trying to be bad guys. We're trying to build housing for people that's affordable. But for us to do that, it has to be in poorer neighborhoods. And HUD is coming in saying, oh, no, but you have to build it in the wealthier neighborhoods. And they're like, well, people don't want projects in wealthier neighborhoods, and we can't afford the land. And so you run into eventually the interventions by the state and the progressive planners, that they just get so tangled in their own mess that they just want to essentially ignore it all. And you start to see the truth, which is just that they believe that they have a right to tell people where they can and can't live. And they think that government subsidies for housing give them the right to essentially force people to live in certain areas, or force people to live in areas that, they'd rather not.
Just think about it. You won't have to make any decisions for yourself. You know how many of you work in little cubicles? Now you'll live in little cubicles. You won't need automobiles, and you won't need private health care. The government will decide what you get and what you don't get. Folks, this is Thomas More's utopia. Folks, this is tyranny looking you in the eyes. I'd love to put a smiley face on this. I really would. But there's nothing to smile about. We're not running out of land. We're not running out of natural resources. We're running out of liberty. We're running out of private property rights. The government just keeps pushing us around, coercing us. Whether it's your local, city, township, county, with their zoning rules, which are out of control, or your state, which piles on top of the federal government with the the phony environmental laws and so forth, and, of course, the federal government, which we've talked about ad nauseum. The government comes between you and your private property endlessly, not just through taxation and regulation, but through zoning, control of the automobile, and so much more.